Hello students, I hope you all are doing great at your homes. So let us start with a new and amazing chapter, the packing. We made a list of things to be taken and a pretty lengthy one it was before we were parted that evening. The next day, which was Friday, we got them all together and met in the evening to pack. We got a big Gladstone for the clothes and a couple of hamper for the victuals and the cooking utensils. We moved the table up against the window, piled everything in a heap in the middle of the floor and sat round and looked at it. So what is happening here, students? In the beginning of the chapter, that 4 or more friends are gathering their things to pack and go to a very amazing and exciting adventure to a place where they can travel and everything. So they are coming together and packing their stuff. I said I'd pack. I rather pride myself on my packing. Packing is one of those many things that I felt I know more about than any other person living. I impressed the fact upon George and Harris and told them that they had better leave the whole matter entirely to me. They fell into the suggestion with a readiness that had something uncanny about it. John spread himself over the chair and Harris cocked his legs on the table. So now the narrator says proudly that I am very good at packing and I want to pack and I take the whole charge of packing. So now the two other friends, George and Harris, they comfortably sat on the chair because the narrator has already taken up the responsibility to look after packing. So they both are now sitting, George and Harris. They both took up a chair and they both are comfortably enjoying their time. This was hardly what I intended. What I meant, of course, was that I should boss the job and that Harris and George pottered about under my direction. I would push them aside every now and then with, "Oh, you here, let me do it." So now the narrator is saying that this is not what I meant, that George and Harris should sit comfortably, but what I meant is that I should take up the charge and George and Harris should follow my orders. There you are, simple enough, really teaching them. As you might say, they are taking it in the way they did. Irritated me. There is nothing that irritated me more than seeing other people sitting about doing nothing when I am working. So now the narrator is saying that although I have told them that I am responsible for packing, but this is not what I meant. What I meant was that I will give them the direction and they both should follow my orders. And now everything is irritating me because I am seeing both of them sitting comfortably and doing nothing that way. He would recline on the sofa and watch me doing things by the hour together, following me round the room with his eyes wherever I went. He said it did him real good to look at me messing about. He said it made him feel that life was not idle dream to be graved and yawned through, but a noble task full of duty and stern work. He said he often wondered now how he could have gone on before he met me, never having anybody to look at while they work. Now I am not like that. I can't sit and see another man slaving and working. So now the narrator is saying that it was okay for me to see people sitting idly, comfortably, not doing anything. But now I have changed myself and I don't like people sitting around idly and doing nothing. I cannot sit still and see another man slaving and working. I want to get up and superintend and walk around with my hands in my pocket and tell him what to do. It is my energetic nature. I can't help it. So now the narrator is saying that my behavior was different before. I was okay seeing people sitting idle and doing nothing, but now when I'm seeing George and Harris doing nothing, it boggles me, it makes me angry. However, I did not say anything but started packing. It seemed a longer job than I had thought it was going to be. But I got the bag finished at last and sat on it and strapped it. Aren't you going to put the boots in? Asked Harris. So now when the narrator is finally packing and zipping the whole luggage, Harris said that, aren't you going to put your boots in it? And I looked round and found I had forgotten them. That's just like Harris. He couldn't have said a word until I got the bag shut and strapped, of course. And George laughed. One of those irritating, senseless, knuckle-headed, cracked jawed laugh of his. They do make me so wild. So now the narrator got very angry that he has actually forgotten the boots, and Harris ने अब तक narrator को बताया नहीं कि वो boots भूल गए हैं, और इस बात पर narrator को बहुत गुस्सा आया क्योंकि he has just finished unpacking and now Harris is telling him about this, and now he has to unpack the whole luggage again. I opened the bag and packed the boots in, and then just as I was going to close it, a horrible idea occurred to me. Had I put my toothbrush? I don't know how it is, but I never do know whether I have packed my toothbrush. So now narrator is very confused that whether he has put his toothbrush or not, or the boots or not, he is speculating. My toothbrush is a thing that haunts me when I am traveling and makes my life miserable. I dreamt that I haven't packed it and wake up in the cold precipitation. What do we mean by precipitation? Sweat. That now the narrator is sweating that कि शायद वो अपनी ब्रश डालना भूल गए या फिर टूथपेस्ट डालना भूल गए अपने बैग में, और it makes him very agitated. And wake up in cold precipitation and get out of the bed and hunt for it. And in the morning I packed it before I have used it and have to unpack it again to get it out, and it is always the last thing I turned out of the bag and then repack and forget it. So now narrator is very confused that did I put my toothbrush in the bag or not, because in the morning he needs to use it and he needs to get that toothbrush out of his bag again. So narrator is very confused at this moment. Then repack and forget it and have to rush upstairs for it at the last moment and carry it to the railway station wrapped up in my pocket handkerchief. Of course, I had to turn every mortal thing out now, and of course I could not find it. I rummaged the things up into much the same state that they must have been before the world was created and when the chaos resigned. Of course, I found George's and Harris's 18 times over and I couldn't find my own. I put the things back one by one and held everything up and shook it. Then I found it inside a boot. I repacked once more. When I had finished, George asked if the soap was in. I said I didn't care a hang whether the soap was in or not, and I slammed the bag and strapped it. But I had to reopen it. I got shut up finally at 10:30 p.m. and then there remained the hampers to do. Harris said that we should be starting in less than 12 hours time and thought he and George had better do the rest. And I agreed and sat down and there had to go. So now what is happening here, students, that the narrator is asking that I am very tired now, I want to go and sleep for some times because it is already only 12 hours to go to. So now George and Harris took over the charge of packing. They began in a light-hearted spirit, evidently intending to show me how to do it. I made no comments, I only waited. So now George and Harris took over the charge of packing and now the narrator is sitting. So now George and Harris asked the narrator that how they should do or not do, पर जो नरेटर ने कुछ नहीं बताया कि कैसे पैक करनी है चीज़ें और उन दोनों पर ही छोड़ दिया पैक करने के लिए. When George is hanged, Harris will be the worst packer in the world. And I looked at the piles of the plates, cups, kettles, bottles, jar, pies, stoves, cakes and tomatoes, etc. and felt that the thing would soon become exciting. I did. They started with breaking a cup. So now, जब जॉर्ज और हैरिस ने पैक करने का जिम्मा लिया, उन्होंने पहली चीज़ क्या तोड़ी? एक कप तोड़ दिया. That was the first thing they did. They did that just to show you what they could do and get you interested. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of a tomato and squeezed it. And they had to pick out the tomato with teaspoons. So now George and Harris, they both are creating a mess while they are packing this thing. और नरेटर क्या कर रहे हैं? बैठकर देख रहे हैं कि वो दोनों कैसी मेस फैलाते हैं, कैसा कबाड़ा करते हैं पूरी पैकिंग का. And then it was George's turn and he trod on the butter. I didn't say anything but came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. It irritated them more than anything I could have said. I felt that it made them nervous and excited, and they stepped on the things and put things behind them, and they packed the piles at the bottom and put the heavy things on top and smashed the pies. So अब जॉर्ज और हैरिस दोनों क्या कर रहे हैं? पैकिंग कर रहे हैं और नरेटर देख रहे हैं कि वो कैसे सारी चीज़ों को उलट पुलट रख रहे हैं. So what George and Harris did? They both packed the heavy things above the lighter things, so everything is getting squeezed and cracked and crashed. They upset salt over everything. And as for the butter, I never saw two men do more with 1 and 2 pence worth of butter in my entire life than they did. तो अब जॉर्ज और हैरिस क्या कर रहे हैं? जॉर्ज stepped on the butter and they both are having no idea that the butter is getting scorched and sticking to every place that they are going to. After George had got it off his slipper, they tried to put in the kettle. It wouldn't go in and what was in wouldn't come out. They did scrape it out at the last and put it down on the chair. And Harris sat on it and it stuck to him and they went looking for it all over the room. I'll take my oath I put it down on that chair, said George, staring at the empty seat. I saw you do it myself not a minute ago, said Harris. Then they started round the room again looking for it. And then they met again in the center and stared at one another. So now George and Harris, they both are looking for the butter which has been squashed under the chair, and now Harris is saying that I swear I put it on the table but I don't know where it is now. Most extraordinary thing I ever heard of, said George. So mysterious. Then George got round at the back of Harris and saw it. Why, here it was all the time, he exclaimed indignantly. Where? Cried Harris, spinning around. Stand still, can't you? Rotated George, flying after him. And they got it off and packed it in the teapot. Montmorency was in it all, of course. Montmorency's ambition in the life is to get in the way and be sworn at it. So, who's Montmorency here, students? He is the dog of the narrator. If he can swim in anywhere, he particularly is not wanted and be a perfect nuisance and make people mad and have things thrown at his head, then he feels his day has not been wasted. So now the narrator is saying that Montmorency, my dog, is very mischievous and he creates nuisance all the time. So he did the same here in the case of George and Harris. To get somebody to stumble upon him and curse him steadily for an hour is his highest aim and objective. And when he had succeeded in accomplishing his conquest became quite unbearable. He came and sat down on things just when they were wanted to be packed, and he labored under the fixed belief that whenever Harris or George reached out their hands for anything, it was his cold, damp noise that they wanted. He put his legs into the jam and he worried the teaspoons, and he pretended that the lemons were rats and got into a hamper and killed 3 of them before Harris could land him with a frying pan. So now Montmorency, who is the dog of the narrator, he is creating mess around with George and Harris. George and Harris, who don't know how to pack, is also creating mess by throwing away the butter here and there, and everything is messy, and the narrator is sitting on his chair and enjoying the mess that they all are creating. Harris said, I encouraged him. I didn't encourage him. A dog like that doesn't want any encouragement. So now the narrator is saying that I didn't encourage him to do anything because my dog has always been a naughty creature, a naughty animal, and I did not encourage him. It's the nature, original sin that is born in him that makes him do things like that. The packing was done at 12:50 a.m. and Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. George said that if anything was broken, it was broken, which reflection seemed to comfort him. He also said he was ready for the bed. We all were ready for the bed. So now everyone is ready for the bed, and they have somehow packed all the things, keeping heavy things on the top and the lighter things on the bottom. And now Harris and George, they both are comforting themselves by saying that if something is broken, अगर कुछ टूटा है अंदर तो वो टूट गया, हमें पता नहीं, हमें कोई जानकारी नहीं इसकी, और हम कल की कल देखेंगे क्योंकि हम आज बहुत थक गए हैं. So this brings us to the end of the chapter, students. Thank you all for joining.